Everybody, welcome to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and here on my YouTube channel, and welcome to another Presonus StudioLive 32 Series 3 mixer tip. This is where I show you some quick tips of questions that have come in over the last few days to help people getting up and running with their StudioLive 32, and I wanted to share that with you today. But before I do that, if you like what you see in this video, please hit that subscribe button. Also go out to Facebook.com/HomeRecordingMadeEasy and follow me there, as I'm always putting content on Facebook that isn't always a part of YouTube. And also, if you are a StudioLive user, and especially a StudioLive Series 3 mixer user and owner, there's a new Facebook group that I created. If you go to Facebook and you search for Presonus StudioLive Series 3 user group, just ask to be invited. You could come on into the group right now. It's a closed group, but I am accepting new members, and these are all for StudioLive users that are having difficulty or want to pass along knowledge or gain knowledge of the new mixer. And this is a great way for us to get together as a community and help each other get up and running with our new StudioLive mixer. So in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something that I've been asked about a lot from people who got this the new Series 3 mixer, and that is, until the StudioLive Series 3 mixer becomes a full-on Studio One DAW surface control, which it is not as of yet, as of the recording of this video, which is March 2017. How do I use my mixer, route the audio from my Studio One session back through my mixer so I can mix with the StudioLive, and then I ultimately want to be able to export that mix that I created on the StudioLive board. So that's what we're going to do here today. Now, there's a few steps that you have to take to set up your session in the StudioLive to do this, so you may want to get out a pad and a pencil and take some notes here, or you could just rewind this video and watch the step-by-step. So the first thing we're going to do, as you can see in front of you, we are here in Studio One. So there's a couple of things we need to do. We're going to go ahead first to the I/O screen, and we're going to set up our inputs and our outputs. So we're going to come over to Studio One, we're going to go to Preferences, and we're going to go to the Audio Setup tab, and then in the bottom left-hand corner, go to Song Setup. And from there, we have our inputs and our outputs. So we're going to start with our input tab. Now on our input tab, we want to create a stereo input. And on the StudioLive 32, we want to choose channels 37 and 38, which are labeled Assignable 1 and Assignable 2. On the StudioLive Series 3 16 mixer, it may not be 37 to 38. It may be a different set of channels or a pair of channels. Just look for the Assignable 1 and 2. So create your input there. On the output section, or the output tab, you want to create a stereo output here, and I labeled it Main Mix. And you're going to look for your aux left and your aux right, which in my case on the 32 is channels 33 and 34. Again, on the StudioLive Series 316, it may be a different pair of channels, but on the StudioLive 32, it is 33, 34. Then you want to create a mono output for each one of the tracks that correlate in Studio One. So in this particular example, we have, a 10 track mix here. We're just gonna listen to some drums. So I've created 10 outputs, and it's labeled sub 1 through 10. You can double click and you can change this name to anything you want. So if you wanted to name track 1 kick, track 2 snare, track 3 tom, etc., you can do that. But for simplicity, we're just gonna keep it sub 1 through 10. And then you wanna make sure that you assign it accordingly, okay? So now we have our inputs and our output tabs set up in the preferences window. So we're just going to click apply and then click OK. So now down here in Studio One in the console view, you'll see I have my 10 tracks here. I have in brown here, we have kick out, kick in, snare top and bottom, hi-hats, toms 1, 2, and 3, overhead and rooms, channels 1 through 10. We want to make sure that each one of those channels on the input side says none, and on the output side, it correlates to the outputs that we set up in our I/O screen just a few seconds ago. So you'll see that track 1 is sub 1, you'll see track 2 is sub 2, track 3 is sub 3, so on and so forth, all the way up to track 10, which is sub 10. So now we've routed all our tracks properly. Now the last thing we want to do in Studio One here is we want to create a stereo, what I'm calling a print track, or you can call it a stereo record track. So if you think about what we're trying to do here, physically or digitally. What we're trying to do is we're taking our drum session in Studio One and we're routing it through our StudioLive mixer. We're going to create that mix with the faders and effects, and then we're going to bring that mix back into Studio One and we're going to record it in real time onto this stereo print track. It's just like doing analog summing. The routing is the same concept. If you've seen any of my videos in the past about analog summing with the Dangerous Music D-Box, the routing is done exactly the same way. The only difference here is we're substituting the summing box for the StudioLive 32. So we want to create that stereo print track here. Now when we look at our inputs and outputs on that stereo track, we want our inputs to be the main mix, which are the assignable 1 and 2 that we created in the input screen a few seconds ago. And the outputs are going to be the main mix that we created in the output screen a few seconds ago. Okay? So now that we've done that, now we need to go over to the StudioLive. Now everything is ready to go to come through the StudioLive. So let's head on over to the StudioLive and let's take a look at that here. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now we're looking at the StudioLive. So now on the StudioLive, you want to make sure that on each one of your selected tracks, in our cases tracks 1 through 10, you want to make sure that you hit the select button, and you want to make sure that on the input side that we are on the input button in red. Now this is super important. When you turn on your mixer, when you take it out of the box, it's always going to default to the analog. The analog are the actual physical inputs on the back of the mixer that you would use to record live. If you want to route the audio back through from Studio One, you have to hit USB. Okay, so you're going to hit each one of your channels, channel 1, channel 2, make sure it's on USB, channel 3, 4, all the way through channel 10, make sure it's on USB. When we do that, if I were now to play back the audio in Studio One, you will see the audio signal and you will hear the drums coming back in through the StudioLive. So let's do that. Okay, so now you can see on the board that we have signal coming in on all 10 tracks, and you can actually hear the audio. Okay, so now it is set up to route back through. You can go ahead, you can mix your tracks, do whatever you want to do. And once you get that mix ready to go and you say, okay, now I got the mix the way I want and I want to print it into Studio One so I can export it as a finished product, this is how you do it. So we're going to go back over to Studio One. Okay, and now that we have our faders on our StudioLive all set up and we want to print this mix, we want to make sure a couple of things. We want to make sure that we record enable this print track, okay? And then we want to make sure, if you want to see the audio actually coming through on this print track, you got to turn on the monitor button. So for example, you can see now the audio coming in on this track, okay? If you turn off the speaker button or the little monitor button, you won't see the audio, even though it will record. But I like to keep it on just so I can see it as a visual. Okay, so now we go to the beginning of our loop. We've record enabled our track, and we're going to go ahead and hit record in Studio One. And you will see now that we are recording what we've mixed on the StudioLive back into Studio One on the print track. So you're going to play your song from top to bottom. You're going to get the entire song printed on the print track. And once you've done that, once you've gone ahead and done that, now you want to export this printed mix from Studio One out as an MP3 or a WAV, which is easy to do. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that on your print track you hit solo to mute all your other tracks. So all we're going to be listening to is what we recorded on the print track. Okay, so now and you want to take off the record enable button. So now if I were to hit play, you don't hear anything, right? We take off the monitor button, you'll see the audio signal, but you say, well, where's the audio? I don't hear anything. I can see it in Studio One, but I don't hear anything. That's why we got to go back to the StudioLive, and let me show you one last thing here. So if we go back to the StudioLive, what you want to make sure you do now is you look underneath my little video here. You'll see the page previous and next button on the StudioLive on the top left-hand corner. You want to hit the next button, and you'll see all the faders go down. And you want to come over, in this case on track 5 here. This is where we set up our main outs in our Studio One preferences I/O window. Remember that? So now if I hit this if I hit Studio One and I play again, Oh, let me just get back and play. Oop, the loop's over. There we go. You can see the signal coming in on the StudioLive, and we can hear the audio. Right? If I turn it down, no audio. Turn it up, no audio. So the trick is, when you're playing back what you've already printed into Studio One, you're going to use this main out, and in this case on track 5 on the StudioLive. When you're printing and you're actually doing the recording from Studio One to this print track, you want to make sure this fader is all the way down. If you don't do that, you're going to get kind of a feedback loop there. You want to be careful about that. So when you're recording and you're mixing and you're printing your final mix into Studio One, make sure this fader's all the way down. Okay, you can play around with the mix all you want, but make sure that this fader is all the way down. When you are ready to listen back to what you've already printed, you can solo up the print track in Studio One. You turn up this track and you will hear the audio, and then you can go ahead and set your input, your start and your end flags in Studio One, and you can export your audio just like you would with any other session that you've worked on in the past. So I hope that video was helpful. Hopefully you wrote down the steps. If not, go back, rewind the video, and watch it again. And until the next tip with the Presonus StudioLive 32, this has been Dave with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. Thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe button. Please go to Facebook and follow me there. And check me out on Twitter as well, at HomeRecordingMadeEasy. And I will speak to you guys all soon. Thanks so much for your support, and take care.